Hey guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. So today, be reacting to Zack D films. Anyways, we should get started.
Its squashed snout. If the ketchup, when a bulldog breathes, its squashed snout and closed nostrils block the air from flowing properly. But hundreds of years ago, they had longer snouts, smoother faces, and straighter legs. Over the years, close relatives were bred together to exaggerate their features. And now their big jaws cause crowded teeth and infected gums. Their skin folds get constant infections, and their snouts cause serious breathing problems. And since they've been bred to have large heads, giving birth to the puppies is almost impossible. The bottle is farting. Close the lid
What?
and grab it by the base. Then swing it in a circle. The ketchup inside will want to stay still, but as you swing it, the bottle and ketchup move in different directions. Now, if you just shake the bottle, it moves
What?
in different directions. Now, if you just shake the bottle, it moves. Push the ketchup away from the cap. But when you swing it, the force pushes the ketchup away from the center of the swing, meaning it all collects in the cap. If the ketchup
This is a
bottle
nice
is
ketchup
farting, close the lid, the dead man's
Ew.
hand would hold a candle. And when it was taken into a house, legend says everyone who saw it would be paralyzed, allowing the thieves to take whatever
That's just gross.
they wanted. Take whatever they wanted. You see, the hand was cut from a hanged man, and their fat was scooped from their body to form a candle, while a hair was plucked for the wick. And this was all wedged between the fingers and lit. A different variation coated each finger in oil, and the thief would light them one by one, causing the sleeping people to fall into a coma. But if any of the fingers didn't catch fire, it meant one victim was still awake in the house. The dead man's hand
This
would
is
hold it.
gross.
The pilot would climb into the torpedo, squeezing behind the 3,000-pound warhead, and it was launched from the submarine toward an enemy ship. The pilot would extend a viewing tube above the water to plan a path to the target. Then they'd steer it underwater using hand controls. When he hit, the warhead would explode, instantly killing the pilot.
In Japan.
But because they were hard to control, most of these torpedoes actually missed. And it was designed as a one-way trip, meaning there was no escape plan. Instead of just waiting to run out of air, the pilots would just detonate the warhead.
That's
The
just
pilot
weird.
would climb. If a hummingbird grew as big as a jet, each flap of its wings would send gusts of wind tearing through the streets like a hurricane. But it would need to drain more than 2 billion flowers daily just to keep its wings flapping. That's over 40,000 gallons of nectar every single day. But at that size, its heart would tear itself apart trying to pump blood through the entire body. And even if it survived, the heat from its massive wing muscles would build so fast, it would cook the bird from the inside out. If a
Damn.
hummingbird grew as big, how many AC units would it take to cool the entire state of Texas? Well, Texas covers over 250,000 square miles. And
Okay.
during the summer, temperatures often climb over 100 degrees. To drop it by just 10 degrees, you would need over 10 billion AC units blasting all at once. That's 27 times the number of units currently in the US. They would suck up 36 terawatts of power, more than the entire planet can produce. And that amount of energy use would create ozone and pump greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. Meaning rather than cooling Texas, you would actually be overheating the entire planet. How many AC units would it? They poured liquid nitrogen into a swimming pool, hoping to create fog for their party. But something went wrong. You see, liquid nitrogen boils at a super low temperature, and when small amounts are put into water, it becomes a long-lasting white mist. But the host used 4 buckets, which turned into a heavy blanket of gas that covered the pool, replacing all of the air and choking the guests as they collapsed in the water. 8 people were hospitalized, while 1 was even left in a coma, and the hosts were never charged
What?
for a crime.
Like, Why that? Like, that don't make sense.
They poured liquid nitrogen. After you insert it, the rollers grab the penny and pull it into a tiny gap. One roller is flat and helps pull it forward, and the other has the design carved into its surface. As they clamp down, the pressure is so strong that it squeezes the penny, and this crushes the metal, forcing the disc to stretch into a long, thin oval. As the carved parts of the roller presses in, it raises letters and lines. Then it slides out the other side and drops into a tray with a cool design. After you insert it, they threw him in a freezing outdoor cell in a high-security prison, and his hands and feet were locked inside special shackles that took hours to unlock. You see, he had escaped twice before, and the guards were after you insert, they threw him in a freezing outdoor cell in a high-security prison, and his hands and feet were locked inside special shackles that took hours to unlock. You see, he had escaped twice before, and the guards were determined it wouldn't happen again. But when they weren't watching, he spat his miso soup onto the cuffs and the food slot. Over time, the salt corroded the metal, and during a blackout, he twisted them open. Next, he dislocated both shoulders and slipped out through the weakened food slot, before vanishing into the snow. They threw him in a freezing. He shoved a blunt needle between his eye and his skull, then moved it around to see what would happen. The pressure from the needle changed the shape of his eyeball, making him see different colored circles depending on where he pressed. You see, he wanted to find out if color came from the inside of the eye or from light hitting the objects he was looking at. But he actually ended up proving that the eye captures images upside down, changing the way we understand sight. He shoved a blunt needle between he pulled the pin, assuring the court it was totally safe. You see, this was an anti-terrorist case, and he wanted to prove a grenade was easy to use. He was sure all the weapons were no longer active. But a few seconds later, the detonator exploded in his hand. It injured the officer and sent shrapnel flying into an assistant's head. The blast even knocked the judge off his chair, and the remaining weapons he brought had to be tested to prevent another accident. He pulled the pin, assuring the robot bunnies were placed deep into the swamp. They were covered in fur, heated from the inside, and programmed to twitch like prey. You see, giant pythons were eating too many animals. Rabbits, raccoons, and even bobcats were disappearing. But the snakes were nearly impossible to find. So they placed the robot bunnies in the swamp to lure the snakes out of hiding. Cameras caught the moment they slithered close, alerting the hunters so they could trap the snakes and remove them. The robot, he noticed his nipple leaking out of nowhere, so he went to get an x-ray, which revealed a knife in his chest that he didn't know about. You see, years prior, he was stabbed in the back during a fight, and the knife had slipped through his shoulder bone, falling into his chest cavity without him ever knowing. His skin closed over it and sealed it in. But over the next 8 years, it slowly got infected, eventually forcing the pus out of his nipple. Doctors performed surgery to remove it, and the man survived for the second time.
Hey!
He noticed his nipple.
This is Superman. This is Captain Man. No, this is Captain Man. You can hook it the right size. He is indestructible. He is Captain Man.
Leaking out of nowhere. So he went to get an x-ray, which if Mount Rushmore was carved to show their whole bodies, they would need to be tightly packed with how squished their faces are. And because it's built near the ground, they would be kneeling on their hands and knees, with their arms sort of tangled together. And if you looked from the other side, you would only see their butts. You see, the sculptor had actually planned to carve their upper halves to look like they were standing with their legs underground, and their waists just above the surface. But the start of World War II was draining the government's money, and on top of that, the original sculptor died, meaning Mount Rushmore was never completed. If Mount Rushmore was the ship struck a rock just off the coast and began to tip. Water flooded the lower decks and killed the power, but the captain claimed it wasn't serious, waiting over an hour to start evacuation. As panic spread, he climbed into a lifeboat and left the sinking ship. Meanwhile, waiters and crew members helped passengers escape. They stayed behind and saved lives, but 32 people died in the chaos, all while the captain was sailing away. He was later sentenced to 16 years in prison.
This captain has got. If I was him, if I was one of the passengers and I saw a captain um like go into the boat, I would follow him and push him out. Because like this guy has guts. I wouldn't have done this even if I was dead.
For his actions. The ship struck a rock. He placed an ad for cleaners, instructing them to wear jeans, a blue shirt, and a yellow safety vest, and to meet him at the bank. Then, when they were all there, he pepper sprayed the guard, grabbing 2 bags of money, and vanished into the crowd dressed exactly like him. When police arrived, they found the parking lot filled with identical workers, all matching the thief's description, and the robber had gotten away.
Huh. Y'all dumb. Like,
But weeks before, a homeless man saw him practicing the robbery. He noted his license plate and told the police, who traced it and arrested him immediately. He placed an ad for 2 puppeteers sat inside the torso, each controlling an arm. And with their free hands, they moved his head and tongue. Inside, a tiny monitor showed them the other actors, allowing them to interact. A third man inside the tail made it wiggle, and another would lay beneath them, using a set of bellows to make Jabba's chest rise and fall. They also pulled strings to move the mouth. Finally, a radio operator controlled Jabba's eyes, adjusting pupil dilation, direction, and blinking. In between takes, a crew constantly rubbed gel across Jabba's body to keep him looking slimy and gross. 2 puppeteers, the tiny backpack is glued onto the roach's back, containing a battery, radio, and microphone. Then wires are attached to the antenna, and it's released into the disaster site. By zapping the left antenna, scientists can make it turn right, and vice versa. As it walks around, the microphone listens to any cries for help, while the radio sends scientists its location. They can even use teams of cockroaches to find victims. Now, scientists are still testing these parts, but someday you might just be saved by a cockroach. The tiny backpack is glued on. He pulled the dying crocodile from the riverbank and took it home to treat its injuries. For 6 months, he kept it in a secret pond behind his house, where he would feed it 9 pounds of meat a day. He even slept beside it, thinking his love would heal its wounds. And when he tried to release it back to the wild, the crocodile refused to leave and ended up staying with the man for over 20 years. Now, during this time, they performed shows for tourists, and when it finally died, the man held a public funeral, where he sang a song for his crocodile friend. Record the screeching noise broadcast over the radio, and this wrote a code onto the tape. When it was loaded into a computer, it would translate the sound into commands, which turned into a video game that you could actually play. Entire radio shows were dedicated to broadcasting these games, and by recording them, you could play them for free. But eventually, the code got too complex, and the cassettes were replaced by floppy disks. The tape would record the screeching noise broadcast over the radio. She watched her daughter fail the cheerleading tryouts as the coaches picked another girl. And she realized if she just killed the girl's mom, the girl would be too sad to cheerlead, letting the daughter take her place. So the woman asked a family member to hire a hitman to do the job. But he secretly recorded her plan and went to the police, who immediately arrested her. She watched her daughter fail. He stacked his caps on his head and tried to sell them according to the story. When he got tired, he fell asleep beneath a tree. But while he slept, a group of monkeys snatched every cap but one. When he woke up, he saw them in the branches, each one wearing a stolen cap. He shook his fingers at them, and they did the same. He stomped and yelled for them to return the hats, but they only copied him. When he realized what they were doing, he threw his cap to the ground, and one by one, the monkeys did too. He smiled, gathered his caps, and walked on, showing that keeping a cool head is the best way to solve a problem. He stacked his... If you eat an unpopped kernel, the sudden force could split your tooth right down the middle. A dentist would have to drill the jagged edges to smooth it out, before applying a bonding glue to the damaged areas. Next, a tooth-colored filling is layered onto the crack to seal it, and special light hardens the material to create a stable surface. Finally, the dentist drills down the material to match the tooth, finishing the repair. But in severe cases, the only solution may be to extract it entirely. If you eat an unpopped kernel, the sudden force could split your tooth right down the middle. A dentist would have to drill the jagged edge GPT, what he could use instead of table salt, and it told him to swap it for sodium bromide. You see, the chatbot scanned through dozens of articles for salt alternatives, and it saw that sodium bromide is chemically similar to table salt. But this substance is actually toxic to humans in high doses, and for 3 months, he sprinkled it on every meal. Soon, his skin broke out, and he had no energy. Then he became paranoid and was convinced that his neighbors were poisoning him until he finally got medical treatment. He asked ChatGPT what they dumped the pot of honey all over the servant, and this attracted all the nearby flies to her. You see, the pharaoh hated the insects, so he came up with this plan where the flies would all go towards the honey-soaked servants instead of him. Now, it worked, but over time, people began to admire flies for their persistence. And centuries later, they became a symbol of courage, with the bravest soldiers getting awarded with golden flies. They dumped the pot of honey all over the servant, and this attracted all the nearby flies to her. You see, the pharaoh hated the insect.
In 100 billion DCs ago.
So he came up, he pulled on the ninja mask, then climbed onto the rooftop and slipped inside the house. And as his victims slept, he stole their cash.
Why pause? Don't pause. Why'd you pause?
And as his victims slept, he stole their cash. For 8 years, he pulled off over 250 heists, all while avoiding the police. But one night, he pulled off his mask, and his face was caught on camera. Police followed him and discovered he was a 74-year-old man. And when they arrested him, he told them he just simply didn't want to work. He pulled on the ninja mask, then climbed onto the roof. She gets shut inside the cabinet, and the magician slides giant blades through the compartment. Then he slides the middle section sideways, and puts his hands through the middle to prove that it's empty. Now, you might expect her chest to be ripped sideways from her body during this trick. But when the middle section moves, the cabinet has a small hidden compartment. This allows her to twist her torso to fit inside, which is how this trick is done. She gets shut inside the cabinet. They found a skeleton wedged in a narrow gap between the walls of their new house. And she was identified as the previous owner of the home. You see, years before, she vanished without a trace. He was sleeping in a dumpster when it suddenly tilted, dumping him straight into the garbage truck. And before he realized what happened, the compactor began pressing inward, squeezing him tighter and tighter. He screamed as loud as he could in the tight space, until a person nearby heard him. They called for help, and police quickly alerted the truck driver, and the compactor stopped just inches away from crushing him. He was sleeping in a dumpster when they put her body in an iron coffin with a porthole over her face. People would look inside, admiring her beauty even in death. For over 100 years, her face was preserved in the sealed chamber, until a visitor's child tapped on the glass and cracked it. Mold spores suddenly rushed into the coffin, and soon her skin was covered in fungus, leaving a white mask where her face used to be. They put her body in an iron coffin with a... He pulled the Mona Lisa off the wall and slipped out of the museum. And since he had covered it in a blanket, nobody paid attention. He smuggled it home, stashing it in the false bottom of a trunk and sliding it under his bed. Newspapers announced the heist, making the Mona Lisa instantly famous. For 2 years, the painting stayed hidden, until finally the thief took it to Italy to try and sell it. But the collector knew it was stolen and alerted the police, and the painting was returned more valuable than ever before. He pulled the Mona Lisa off. They pushed a tube into the squirrel's tunnel and pumped in flammable gas until the burrow was full. Then they lit a spark at the tunnel entrance. The gas ignited instantly, sending a shockwave racing underneath. Dirt and smoke burst from the ground as the explosion tore through the tunnel, and the force blasted the squirrel out of its burrow in seconds. He pushed a tube into the... He crashed his moped without a helmet, and his right side was left paralyzed, and his speech was slurred. So when he complained at a restaurant, the owner thought he was drunk. He called the police, who threw him in a cell overnight. Later, he tried to take a taxi, but again, the driver thought he had been drinking and called the cops. He spent a second night in jail before he could explain. Then he found himself close to a bar fight, and police tried to arrest him again, until they found an ID card explaining his brain injury, and they let him go. He crashed his moped. The drone would fly toward the flower using tiny propellers, and its underside would be coated in horsehairs, which are cupped. The ground beneath her feet began to cave in, and she plunged into a 9-foot deep sinkhole filled with water. You see, there used to be an old well there decades ago. But over time, the ground had dissolved into a giant underground hole, which crumbled and trapped the woman for 20 minutes. Finally, her neighbors heard her cries and called the firefighters, who hauled her out with a rope, saving her life. The ground beneath her feet, the bacon is rolled into hollow tubes and baked until they're hard. Then they're bundled together and wrapped with more meat. After that, it's taped to an oxygen hose that releases a steady stream of air. You see, bacon is packed with fat, which stores energy. And when you light it and add oxygen, that fat turns into fuel, which feeds the intense flame, creating a jet of fire that can cut straight through metal. The bacon, she served beer as fast as she could, racing from table to table. You see, her manager promised that whoever sold the most beer would receive a brand new Toyota. And when she finally won, they blindfolded her and led her outside. But instead of a car, they handed her a box. And inside was a plastic Yoda figure from Star Wars. Her manager laughed, explaining that this was her brand new toy Yoda, meaning he had tricked her and never actually planned on giving away a car. She quit her job and took them to court, and the case settled, giving her enough money to buy a real car.
Damn.
She served beer. Start by rolling toilet paper across the gap. Then go back and do it 50 more times, and when you step onto it, you would still fall straight through. You see, a single sheet can only hold about the weight of a book, meaning more than 150 layers would have to be woven together just to hold your weight. And laid flat, the bridge would be about 20 sheets long and 8 sheets wide. Just enough for one person to walk across, but only one at a time. Start by rolling toilet. He was working on a shoe when his thumb got caught in the trimming machine.
Ew.
And in a split second, the blade had sliced through his thumb, dropping it to the ground. He was rushed to the hospital where surgeons amputated his big toe. Next, they connected the blood vessels, nerves, and tendons where his thumb used to be. After months of physical therapy, he could use his toe just like a regular thumb, allowing him to use his hand and get back to fixing shoes. He stepped onto the moon and dumped a handful of rocks into a bag, which was sent for testing back on Earth, but it got mixed up in storage and shipped to a museum where the owner illegally sold it. And years later, a woman bought it at an auction for $1,000. When she asked NASA to test it, they refused to give it back to her because they realized it was from the first moon landing. So she sued them and won it back, auctioning off the bag for millions of dollars and giving the money to charity. He stepped onto the moon and dumped a
She's very nice.
If you wanted your house to bounce like a lowrider car, you would need to attach car-sized hydraulic cylinders underneath it. And the crocodile lunged from the water and bit the man on his thigh. It dragged him down, ripping through his skin and muscle. But Steve Irwin jumped onto the crocodile's back, and the man managed to tear his leg out of his mouth. He began to climb out, and the crocodile followed, but Steve Irwin forced a stick in between its jaws, stopping it from biting and allowing both men to escape. His friend needed 187 stitches, but he survived and went back to work soon after. The crocodile lunged. If you tried to cook a chicken breast with a lightning strike, it would instantly char the outside while leaving the inside raw. Instead, set up a tall rod to catch the lightning strike, sending most of it safely into the ground. Then have a smaller part of the rod in a big tank of salty water. When the bolt strikes, the electricity would heat up the water, and that water is used to heat up the chicken. If the lightning keeps striking, the tank heats evenly, cooking all the way through the chicken. If you try to cook, as the candle burns, the flame slowly melts the wax, inching closer to the clothespin. A metal bottle cap sits on top of a Q-tip, held in place by one leg of a paper clip. The other leg is angled downward, placed exactly where you want the candle to stop. As it gets shorter, the wax under...
Zack. Okay, I gotta say this is Zack. He gives us the most weirdest answers, even if we did not know. And like most of these are true stories. And I remember when I noticed somebody literally cut his own thumb and just his toe. No, who else? That's gross. But what's that?
Beneath melts away, causing the leg to fall. This tiny movement lets the bottle cap drop straight down onto the flame. When it lands, it blocks out all the oxygen, smothering the fire instantly. As the candle burns, if you plopped every human on Earth onto one giant scale, it would read over 500 million tons. But what if you...
But what if you what?
100 million tons. But what if you did this with all of the bugs on Earth? Well, you might think it would be about the same, but Earth is crawling with over 10 quintillion bugs, massively outnumbering humans in numbers and mass. Altogether, they would weigh over 1 billion tons, almost double the weight of every human on the planet. If you plopped when you blow on a dandelion, each tiny white parachute is actually a seed. The wind carries them until they land, and a new dandelion grows, which is why you see them everywhere. When the yellow flowers lose their petals, the seed starts to grow until it becomes a white puffball, and the cycle begins again. Now, most people just see them as weeds, but you can actually use the flowers for salads. The leaves can be cooked like spinach, and if you bake the root and grind it up, it actually tastes a bit like coffee, meaning the whole thing is edible. When you blow on a they shot the blowgun while she was playing, and the dart went up her nose. It shot deep in her skull and lodged in the bone, right next to a major artery. And if they pulled it out, she could have died. Instead, doctors put a tiny camera and drill up her nose. Over the next few hours, they drilled through bone, removing small pieces until the dart came loose and it was carefully pulled out. They shot the blowgun. You would pack shoulder to shoulder in a giant circle, and the outer layer would face deadly cold winds, while the inner group would be warmed by body heat. But the layers of the circle would have to keep switching, slowly moving people from the outside into the center of the group. If a person spent too long on the outer layer, slowly moving people from the outside into the center of the group. If a person spent too long on the outer layer, they would die from the cold, leaving the inside exposed to the wind. Now, penguins have layers of thick fat and feathers to keep them warm during this, but the human body isn't as good at keeping the cold out. So each person would need to constantly wiggle their feet and squeeze their calves to produce heat. Otherwise, everyone would freeze to death in hours. You would pack. His metal dog tag slipped out of his shirt while he was sleeping, and the chain dangled down and touched the exposed prongs of his phone charger. In an instant, electricity surged into the necklace, turning it into a burning hot wire. The current shot through his neck, chest, and hand, searing his skin. But he managed to tear the necklace off just in time, leaving him with nothing but severe burns. His metal dog. If you place a quarter on the table and roll another one all the way around it, you would expect the moving coin to spin just one rotation. But when it gets back to where it started, it's actually spun twice. You see, as the coin rolls, its edges has to touch every single part of the other quarter, and this makes it spin one full turn already. But the coin's middle is also going in a big circle around the other coin, and this extra trip makes the coin rotate one more time. So instead of one spin, the moving coin does two. And this was so confusing that even the SAT books got it wrong, and they had to throw the question out. If you place a quarter on she jumped a fence into the polar bear enclosure, right in the middle of feeding time. One of the bears bit her from behind as she swam. Rescuers finally pulled her out, but seconds later, she slipped and fell straight back in. The bear attacked again before they managed to drag her to safety for good. She had deep bites covering her body, but survived, and was later fined for trespassing. She jumped a fence. He pulled the bench out from under him.
That lady is so unlucky. First, she almost died twice, and now she got to pay the fine. Like, you guys aren't fine. That's rude. That's evil.
And smashed it in half in front of everyone. You see, in medieval Italy, bankers worked from wooden benches called banca. And according to the legend, if they couldn't pay their debts, breaking the bench, known as rata, showed they were ruined and had no money. Together, bancarata meant broken bench, the symbol of financial ruin. Now, over time, the phrase was passed along to other countries, and eventually it was translated into English as bankrupt. He pulled the bench out from under him and smashed it in half in front of everyone. You see, in medieval Italy, bankers worked from wooden benches called banca. And according to the legend, if they couldn't pay their debts, breaking the bench, known as rata, showed they were ruined and had no money. Together, bancarata meant broken bench, the symbol of financial ruin. Now, over time, the phrase was passed
broken bench
along to other countries.
Bankrupt.
And eventually it was translated into English as bankrupt. He pulled the cobra, wrapped itself around the toddler's hands. Before anyone could react, he leaned down and bit its head. The snake died instantly, but the boy passed out on the ground. His parents rushed him to the hospital, afraid that he had been poisoned. But venom works best when it's injected through the snake's fangs. And since he bit the snake before it could bite him, he only suffered a little swelling and quickly recovered. Cobra wrapped its fold the square in half, then unfold it to leave a crease. And do this 3 more times until you have
Oh gosh. Oh god.
2 diagonal folds and 2 horizontal.
I don't want to say this because this channel is kind of good for other people, but I think I hate Zack D films. What is this? Like, who? But let's just continue.
Frontal folds. Next, he had to glide down toward a highway because his engine had stalled. But as the landing gear lowered, it hooked onto the trunk of a car speeding below, and the plane and car moved together at highway speed. Once he noticed, the driver hit the brakes, stopping safely with the plane still perched on his trunk. Now, no one got hurt, but the pilot said he would never fly again. He had to stick your finger behind the eye and pop it right out of the tuna. Then boil it for a minute to remove dirt and bacteria. Throw them into a pot with broth, soy sauce, and ginger, and let them simmer for about 15 minutes. As they're cooking, cover them with tin foil to keep them moist. The fat around them will melt into the pot, mixing with
How do people like this? This is gross.
the other ingredients, and once they're done, you would suck the juice out of the eye as a delicacy. Stick your finger as you walk on the tiles, the pressure creates mechanical movement that shifts a small generator inside the tile, he walked into the bank pretending to be a health inspector and demanded all the staff take a vaccine. They lined up and swallowed it, but moments later, they collapsed in extreme pain. You see, he had actually given them a deadly poison. And as it started to kill them, he grabbed cash from the vaults. 12 people died slowly and painfully, and all he walked away with was a few $100s. He walked in as you slice down. The blade can slip off the pit and shoot in your hand if you try to cut an avocado while holding it. If you stab the pit to twist it out, it can also slip, sending the knife into your fingers. Instead, place the avocado on a cutting board and slice around the pit. Then rotate the halves apart. Tap the pit with your knife blade and twist to lift it out. And if you clean the pit, wrap it in a damp paper towel and let it sit for a few weeks, it'll start to germinate. Then just put it in some soil and you now have an infinite avocado glitch. As you slice down, the real money was placed between the play money, and tiny metal compasses were disguised as playing pieces. Then, secret maps were pressed flat inside the board game. The games were boxed and placed into care packages and sent into prison camps. You see, the British military worked with a toy company, and together they hid these secret tools inside the boards, disguised as a simple game. Prisoners used the money to bribe guards, and once free from the camp, the map and compass helped guide them to freedom. The real money was she dropped her diamond ring in the garden, accidentally burying. He tried to carjack the van with 2 kids inside, but the 12-year-old started punching him and screaming for help. As he tried to steal the car, she pushed the gear stick into drive and held it there. And this safety feature made it impossible to start the engine. When the criminal realized this, he ran away. Police got him soon after, and the girl survived with only a fractured wrist, saving her sister and herself. The cicadas spend most of their lives buried underground, sucking sap from tree roots. And year after year, billions stay hidden, growing slowly.
Not bad.
In the dark. Then, after 17 years, they all begin to crawl out. Billions emerge together, covering trees and fences and streets. And each after she withdrew thousands of dollars from the bank, he followed her through the streets. And while she was walking, he grabbed her and threw her to the ground. Then he took what he thought was the cash and started to run away. But he realized he had taken the wrong bag. So he came back and slammed her even harder into the concrete. Her spine snapped, leaving her paralyzed from the waist down. He took the money and ran, but was later caught and sentenced to 30 years in prison. If you plugged the top of an erupting volcano, would it prevent it from exploding? Well, magma and gas would still be rising from deep inside the earth. And with nowhere to escape, the pressure would build higher and higher until the rock around the magma chamber would start to crack, opening new eruption points miles away from the original volcano. But the pressure might cause it to explode sideways out of the volcano, causing the eruption to be even more destructive than normal. If you plugged, he filmed himself rubbing meat on his butt and sticking
Brother,
cheese up his nose before putting them on sandwiches to serve at Domino's. They posted the video.
Okay, guys, I think I'm done for Zack D films for today. Remember, always love yourself. You're the best. Love you.